Why would you be willing to die? They chose an answer that ended in torture, not money, not power, not politics, something far more ordinary, faith, the quiet decision to trust God before seeing proof, to obey without guarantees, to believe when every visible fact says you should walk away. That raises an uncomfortable question. If faith was valuable enough for countless people to suffer and die for, why has it become so easy for us to ignore? The strange thing is that most people have heard of Hebrews chapter 11. Many call it the Bible's Hall of Faith. They remember the famous names: Abraham, Moses, Noah, David, heroes who seem larger than life. But few stop to notice how the chapter ends. It does not finish with victory celebrations. It does not end with crowns, wealth, or comfortable lives. Instead, it suddenly turns dark. The language becomes unsettling. People are tortured. Others are mocked. Some are chained. Some are imprisoned. Some are stoned. Some are killed with the sword. One haunting line even speaks of people being sawn in. 2. Their names are never recorded. History remembers Abraham. It remembers Moses. But these men and women remain anonymous, forgotten by history, yet remembered by God. And they all suffered for the same reason. Not because they started revolutions. Not because they built kingdoms. Not because they threatened empires with armies. They simply refused to stop believing. That is what makes Hebrews chapter 11 so different from almost every other list of heroes in history. It measures greatness by something that cannot be photographed, weighed, or placed inside a museum. Faith. The chapter opens with one of the most quoted definitions in Scripture. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. At first glance, those words sound beautiful, almost poetic, but hidden inside them is a dangerous idea. Faith means acting before certainty arrives. It means choosing obedience. While questions remain unanswered, it means moving forward when every visible sign says to stay where you are. That has never been easy. Human beings naturally want evidence first. We want guarantees before commitment. We want certainty before sacrifice. We want to know exactly how the story ends before taking a first step. Hebrews presents the opposite. Its heroes rarely saw the full picture. Many never witnessed the promises fulfilled during their own lifetimes. Some spent decades waiting. Others died still expecting what they had never received. Yet the chapter never describes them as failures. Instead, it celebrates their willingness to trust beyond what their eyes could confirm. That is why Hebrews chapter 11 is more than a collection of inspiring biographies. It is a challenge directed across thousands of years. Because the real question is not whether Abraham had faith. The real question is whether we would have. Would we leave everything familiar without knowing the destination? Will we build when everyone laughed? Will we keep believing through decades of silence? Or will we quietly decide it was not worth the cost? Those questions become even more uncomfortable when we remember how little many of us are asked to sacrifice today. For most people watching this video, faith costs almost nothing. No prison cell waits outside the door. No executioner demands that belief be abandoned. No crowd gathers with stones in their hands. The greatest challenge is often distraction. A phone notification, another meeting, another bill, another endless stream of entertainment. Faith slowly moves to tomorrow, then next week, then someday. Not because it is forbidden, because it is forgotten. That may be the greatest irony of Hebrews chapter 11. The people inside these pages desperately held on to something that modern life often treats as optional. Some crossed deserts because of it. Some abandoned wealth because of it. Some endured ridicule because of it. Some accepted torture rather than deny it. And today, many people barely think about it all. This chapter refuses to let that contrast remain comfortable. It asks whether the greatest danger is not persecution, but indifference. Perhaps faith does not disappear because someone violently takes it away. Perhaps it disappears because no one believes it is valuable enough to protect. As we move through the lives recorded in Hebrews, we will discover something unexpected. These were not fearless people. They doubted. They failed. They made painful mistakes. They waited longer than they thought possible. Yet one decision kept appearing again and again. They trusted before they could see. And that simple decision changed history. Before we go there, if stories like this move you, hit subscribe. There's a lot more history hiding in these pages, and we're just getting started. The first name in Hebrews chapter 11 is not a king, a prophet, or a warrior. It is Abel. His story is astonishingly short, only a few verses in the book of Genesis, yet thousands of years later. Hebrews begins with him, not because he lived a long life, not because he achieved great things, but because of one invisible difference: faith. Abel and his brother Cain both approached God with offerings. From a distance, the scene looked ordinary. Two brothers, two sacrifices, two acts of worship. But appearances can be deceptive. Genesis never suggests that Cain arrived empty-handed. He brought something valuable from his own work. Abel also brought an offering, but Hebrews reveals what Genesis only hints at. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain. That single phrase changes everything. The difference was never just the offering. It was the heart behind it. Abel trusted God enough to give his best. Cain fulfilled a religious act without the same trust. One offering came from faith. The other came from obligation. The results were immediate. God accepted Abel's sacrifice. Cain's was rejected. What happened next became the first murder in human history. No armies, no politics, no kingdoms, just one brother killing another, because genuine faith exposed an empty heart. Abel never preached a sermon. He never wrote a book. He never performed miracles. Yet Hebrews says that even though he died, he still speaks. His voice echoes across history with a disturbing message. Real faith will not always be admired. Sometimes it will provoke resentment. Sometimes it will expose what others would rather keep hidden. Sometimes simply trusting God becomes enough to make enemies. That pattern never truly disappears. Again and again throughout history, people who quietly live by conviction challenged those who preferred comfort, not because they forced anyone to change, but because their lives became silent evidence that another way was possible. After Abel, Hebrews moves to a man whose life feels almost impossible to explain: Enoch. Unlike nearly every person in Genesis, Enoch's story ends with words that seem to break the laws of nature. He was not found because God had taken him. No description of death, no burial, no grave. He simply walked with God until one day he was gone. For centuries, readers have debated exactly what happened. Did God remove him from the earth without allowing him to die? The text offers almost no details. Instead, Hebrews focuses on something else entirely. Before he was taken, Enoch was known for one thing. He pleased God, not through military victories, not through public achievements, not through fame. He pleased God because he trusted him. Then comes another sentence that cuts directly into every generation. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Not difficult, not uncommon, impossible. That statement leaves very little room for compromise. Hebrews does not describe faith as one spiritual quality among many. It describes faith as a foundation beneath everything else. Without it, even impressive actions lose their meaning. Imagine living in Enoch's generation. According to Genesis, violence was increasing across the earth. Human corruption was spreading like a disease. The culture moved steadily away from God. Yet one man quietly continued walking in a different direction. Day after day, year after year. No applause, no audience, no guarantee that anyone noticed. Faith often looks exactly like that. Not dramatic moments, daily choices, private obedience, small decisions repeated until an entire lifetime has passed. Enoch reminds us that history is not only shaped by extraordinary events, sometimes it is shaped by ordinary faithfulness sustained over decades. Then Hebrews introduces one of the most recognizable figures in all of Scripture, Noah. Most people know his story because of the ark. Children learn about animals entering two by two. Artists paint rainbows across peaceful skies. Movies focus on giant floods. But Hebrews highlights something much more unsettling. It says Noah built the ark after being warned about things not yet seen. Think carefully about those words. Not yet seen. No one had witnessed what Noah was preparing for. No visible disaster stood on the horizon. No massive storm filled the sky. No rising waters surrounded his home. Only a warning from God, and one man's decision to believe it. Imagine the years that followed. Every strike of the hammer invited another question. What are you building? Why is it so large? Where's the water? Has age finally taken your mind? The ark itself became public evidence of Noah's private faith. Day after day, people watched him build something that made no sense. Mockery probably became normal. Ridicule likely followed him wherever he went. Yet the ark kept growing, board after board, beam after beam, year after year. Faith rarely becomes visible all at once. It usually reveals itself through persistence. Anyone can begin a difficult task with excitement. Very few continue when nothing appears to happen. Noah continued, not for weeks, not for months, for decades. That may have been the greatest miracle before the flood ever arrived. He obeyed while the evidence remained invisible. Then one day, the impossible became reality. The rain began. The skies opened. The earth itself seemed to collapse beneath unimaginable waters. Everything changed in a moment. But Noah's faith had not begun that day. It had been growing quietly for years before anyone else recognized its importance. That is one of the deepest lessons hidden inside Hebrews chapter 11. Faith is usually proven long before results become visible. The world celebrates outcomes. Hebrews celebrates endurance. It honors the years nobody applauds, the lonely seasons when obedience feels unnoticed, the mornings when nothing changes, the prayers that seem unanswered, the work that appears meaningless, because those moments reveal whether faith is genuine. Abel trusted when worship required surrender. Enoch trusted when walking with God meant standing apart from his generation. Noah trusted when every visible fact suggested that everyone else was. Right? 3 different lives, 3 different stories, one invisible thread connecting them all. They believed before they could see. And that simple choice placed them forever inside one of the most remarkable chapters ever written. The journey is only beginning, because the next name in Hebrews chapter 11 will leave everything familiar behind, chasing a promise that seemed almost impossible to believe. The next name in Hebrews chapter 11 is perhaps the most influential of them all, Abraham. 3 major world religions trace their history back to this one man. His story has shaped civilizations, inspired generations, and continues to influence billions of people today. Yet Hebrews does not begin with his greatest achievement. It begins with a journey. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place he would later receive as an inheritance. The sentence sounds simple, until you notice what comes next. He went out, not knowing where he was going. Imagine hearing those words today. Leave your home, leave your security, leave everything familiar. Do not ask for the destination. Do not expect a map. Just go. That is not how most people make life-changing decisions. We compare options. We calculate risks. We demand certainty. Abraham received none of those things. His journey began with trust, not information. He left behind a comfortable world for a future he could not see. Every mile carried the same unanswered question. Was this really God's plan? There were no signs confirming each step, no visible finish line, only the promise that obedience would matter. Hebrews tells us Abraham lived in tents, even after reaching the land God had promised. That detail is easy to overlook. He arrived, but he never truly settled. He remained a traveler in the very place that was supposed to become his inheritance. Why? Because his eyes were fixed on something greater than land. Hebrews says he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. That changes the entire story. Abraham was never chasing comfort. He was chasing a promise beyond this world. His temporary tents reflected an eternal expectation. He understood something many people still struggle to accept. Not every promise reaches its fullest fulfillment during this life. Sometimes faith means living as though the greatest destination still lies ahead. Then the story shifts to someone who is often overshadowed. Sarah. When most people think about Abraham, they picture courage. When they think about Sarah, they often remember laughter. Not joyful laughter, skeptical laughter. When she first heard that she would have a child in old age, the promise seemed impossible. Humanly speaking, it was. Years had passed. Hope had faded. The body had limits. Nature had spoken, yet God spoke differently. Hebrews says that by faith Sarah received power to conceive because she considered the one who promised to be faithful. Notice what the chapter emphasizes. Not Sarah's perfection, not her flawless confidence. Her decision to trust God's character. That matters because faith is often misunderstood. Faith does not mean never asking questions. It does not require pretending circumstances are easy. Sarah struggled. She doubted. She waited through years of disappointment. Yet she ultimately chose to believe that God's promise mattered more than visible reality. From one elderly couple came descendants described as countless as the stars in the sky and the sand along the seashore. The impossible became history. Then Hebrews pauses, almost as if the author wants every reader to stop and reflect. It says all these people died in faith without receiving everything that had been promised. That sentence should surprise us. We expect faith to end with immediate success. Hebrews tells a different story. Many died still waiting. They welcomed God's promises from a distance. They believed in realities they would never fully experience during their earthly lives. From the world's perspective, that seems like failure. From God's perspective, it was faithfulness. They confessed they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Those words carry enormous weight. A pilgrim does not expect permanent comfort. A traveler does not confuse the road with the destination. Their deepest hope was never tied to temporary security. Hebrews says they desired a better country, a heavenly one. That longing shaped every decision they made. Then comes one of the most painful moments in Abraham's entire life. God asked him to offer Isaac, the promised son, the miracle child, the one through whom every future promise seemed destined to unfold. Nothing about the command made sense. If Isaac died, what would happen to the covenant? How could God's promise continue? Every logical conclusion pointed toward contradiction. Yet Abraham climbed the mountain, step after step, not because he understood, because he trusted. Hebrews offers a remarkable insight. It says Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. That idea was extraordinary. Very few people in Scripture had ever witnessed anything resembling resurrection. Abraham had almost no historical evidence to support such confidence. Still, he concluded that if God's promise required the impossible, then God himself would provide the answer. In the end, Isaac was spared. A ram was provided. The sacrifice never happened. But Abraham's willingness revealed something that generations would never forget. Faith is sometimes measured by what we are willing to place into God's hands. The story moves forward. Isaac appears only briefly. Hebrews tells us that by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things yet to come. That detail may seem small, yet it reveals something profound. Isaac spoke about a future he would never personally witness. He believed God's plan would continue after his own life ended. Faith thinks beyond one generation. Jacob follows. Near the end of his life, he blessed the sons of Joseph while leaning on his staff. Picture the scene. An old man, a lifetime marked by victories, failures, fear, loss, and reconciliation. His strength was nearly gone, yet his confidence in God's promise remained. Even in weakness, he looked forward instead of backward. The staff beneath his hand told the story of decades spent wandering, but his blessing pointed toward generations still to come. Joseph carries that same vision even into death. After rising from slavery to become one of the most powerful men in Egypt, he could have considered Egypt his permanent home. Instead, Hebrews remembers something unexpected. Joseph gave instructions concerning his bones. He asked that they not remain in Egypt forever. Why would a dying ruler care about that? Because Joseph believed God's people would one day leave. He knew the promise given to Abraham had not ended. Even death would not separate him from that future hope. His final request became one last act of faith. Centuries later, when Israel departed Egypt, they carried Joseph's bones with them. His confidence outlived him. That image is unforgettable. A nation marching toward freedom, carrying the remains of a man who believed in God's promise long before they ever saw it fulfilled. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, different personalities, different struggles, different generations. Yet every story points toward the same invisible reality. None of them possessed complete certainty. None of them saw the entire picture. Most spent years living with unanswered questions. Still, they continued walking. That is what Hebrews keeps repeating. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty. It is a decision that God's promise deserves greater trust than present circumstances. The chapter is building towards something even greater, because the next generation will not simply wait for God's promises. They will be forced to choose between comfort, power, and faith itself. And no story reveals that conflict more clearly than the life of Moses. Yet, countless people remember Moses more clearly than the rulers who oppose him. Power fades. Faith leaves a different kind of legacy. Moses eventually stood before the Red Sea with an impossible problem. Water blocked the path ahead. An army approached from behind. Every visible fact pointed toward disaster. Yet the people crossed as though walking on dry land. The Egyptians tried the same path. Only one group reached the other side. The difference was not courage alone. It was trust. Faith did not remove the sea. Faith walked through it when God made a way. Then Hebrews introduces one of the most unexpected names in the chapter, Rahab. Unlike Abraham or Moses, Rahab was not known for religious devotion. She lived in Jericho. She was an outsider. Even more shocking, Scripture identifies her as a prostitute. By every human standard, she seemed the least likely candidate for a list of spiritual heroes. Yet Hebrews includes her without hesitation. Why? Because when the Israelite spies entered Jericho, Rahab faced a decision: trust the powerful city around her, or trust the unseen God she had only heard about. She chose the second. She hid the spies. She risked execution. She placed her future in the hands of a God she had never seen. When Jericho's walls finally collapsed, one house remained standing, Rahab's. Her faith rewrote her story. She moved from being an outsider to becoming part of Israel itself. Even more remarkably, she eventually became part of the family line that would lead to King David and generations later to Jesus. Hebrews quietly reminds us of something extraordinary. Faith is not reserved for people with perfect pasts. It belongs to anyone willing to trust God. Then the pace suddenly accelerates. The author almost seems to run out of space. What more shall I say? There is no time, he writes, to tell every story in full. Instead, names begin flowing one after another. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets. Each could fill an entire book. Yet Hebrews reduces their lives to a few powerful images. Through faith, they conquered kingdoms. They administered justice. They obtained promises. They shut the mouths of lions. The image immediately recalls Daniel, a man lowered into a den of hungry lions because he refused to stop praying. The empire demanded compromise. Daniel quietly continued kneeling before God. Faith often looks remarkably ordinary until pressure arrives. Then its true strength becomes visible. Hebrews continues. They quenched the fury of flames. Another unmistakable reference. 3 young Hebrew men stood before a blazing furnace. They were offered a simple choice: bow to the king's image or burn. Their answer still echoes across history. They believed God could rescue them. But even if he did not, they would not abandon him. That may be one of the purest expressions of faith in all of Scripture. Not confidence that everything will end comfortably. Confidence that God remains worthy even if suffering comes. The furnace became their testimony. Faith was not proven because they escaped the fire. It was proven before they entered it. Hebrews speaks of people escaping the edge of the sword. Others became strong out of weakness. Armies fled before them. Women received their dead back through resurrection. For a moment, the chapter seems filled with triumph. Victory follows victory. Miracles multiply. Impossible situations are reversed. This is the kind of ending many people expect. But Hebrews refuses to stop there. Without warning, the tone changes. The victories fade into shadows. Another group appears. Their stories are very different. Others were tortured. Notice the word, others. The chapter deliberately places them beside the miracle stories, not beneath them, not after them, beside them. Some experienced miraculous rescue. Others experienced unimaginable suffering. Both groups are called people of faith. That challenges a common assumption. We often believe strong faith always produces visible success. Hebrews does not. It honors both the rescued and the persecuted. Some refuse release because they hope for a better resurrection. Freedom was available. All they had to do was deny what they believed. They refused. Imagine the weight of that choice. Pain could end immediately. Life could continue. Families could be reunited. All that stood between them. And freedom was compromised. They chose faith instead. Others endured mocking. Public humiliation became part of their testimony. Some were whipped. Others were chained. Some were thrown into prison. Then the descriptions become even more disturbing. They were stoned. History records faithful men like Zechariah dying beneath flying stones. They were sawn in two. Ancient tradition connects those horrifying words of the prophet Isaiah, though Hebrews does not mention a name. Whether the author had Isaiah in mind or another martyr, the image is unforgettable. Human beings were cut apart because they refused to abandon their trust in God. Others were killed with the sword. Some wandered through deserts. Others hid in mountains. Many lived in caves and holes in the ground. The world treated them like criminals. Hebrews offers a stunning reversal. The world was not worthy of them. Think about that sentence. Society rejected them. Governments hunted them. Communities expelled them. History often forgot them. Yet heaven declared that the world itself was unworthy of people like these. They possessed no monuments, no palaces, no military victories, no earthly fame, only faith. And according to Hebrews, that was enough. The chapter reaches one final conclusion. All these people were commended because of their faith, yet none of them received the fullness of what had been promised during their earthly lives. Their stories remained unfinished. They looked forward to something beyond themselves. Generation after generation carried the promise. Each life became another link in a chain stretching across centuries. Some links shined in public victories. Others were hidden beneath suffering. But every link mattered. That is why the anonymous martyrs stand beside Abraham and Moses. Faith is not measured by public recognition. It is measured by faithfulness. And that truth brings us to the uncomfortable question Hebrews has been asking from the very beginning. If ordinary men and women endured prisons, torture, exile, and death rather than let go of their faith, what does it say about a world where faith is rarely attacked, yet so often ignored? Hebrews chapter 11 ends without giving us the ending we expect. There is no final celebration, no long list of rewards, no moment where every question is answered. Instead, the chapter leaves us surrounded by unfinished stories. People who trusted, people who waited, people who suffered, people who died believing that God would complete what they could not yet see. That is why this chapter still feels so unsettling. It refuses to let faith remain an abstract religious idea. It forces us to compare two worlds. One world treated faith as something worth dying for. The other often treats it as something not worth thinking about. Perhaps that is the greatest contrast hidden inside the title of this video. They were tortured for the same thing many people now scroll past in seconds. Not because modern life is more evil than the ancient world, but because distraction can accomplish what persecution never could. Persecution attacks faith from the outside. Distraction slowly empties it from the inside. One is loud. The other is almost silent. That silence is dangerous. Very few people wake up intending to abandon what matters most. It happens gradually. A postponed prayer, a forgotten promise. Another day spent chasing everything except what lasts. Weeks become months. Months become years. Eventually, what was once central becomes optional. Hebrews quietly asks whether that is the greater tragedy. The people in this chapter never had the luxury of casual belief. Every decision carried weight. Every act of obedience had consequences. Some lost families. Some lost homes. Some lost freedom. Some lost their lives. Yet they believed the cost of abandoning faith would be even greater. That perspective feels almost foreign today. We are surrounded by endless information.
Mientras tanto, Dios guió a Elías lejos de la vista de Acab. El profeta se refugió junto al arroyo de Kerit, escondido entre las montañas. Allí, en medio del silencio del desierto, aprendió a depender completamente de Dios. Cada mañana y cada tarde, cuervos traían pan y carne para alimentarlo. Elías bebía del arroyo mientras observaba cómo la tierra alrededor comenzaba a secarse. Los días
Chapter 11 remains so powerful after thousands of years. It does not ask whether God has spoken. It asks what we will do with what we already know. Abel reminds us that faith begins in the heart before anyone else can see it. Enoch reminds us that quiet faithfulness can matter more than public recognition. Noah reminds us to keep building, even when the world cannot understand why. Abraham teaches us to walk without demanding every answer first. Sarah shows that faith can survive seasons of doubt. Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph remind us that God's promises extend far beyond one lifetime. Moses proves that comfort is not always the greatest reward. Rahab demonstrates that no past is beyond redemption. Gideon, Samson, David, Samuel, and the prophets reveal that imperfect people can still become part of God's story. And the unnamed martyrs, perhaps they leave the deepest impression of all. We do not know their faces. We do not know their names. We do not know where most of them were born or where they died. History forgot them. God did not. In a world obsessed with recognition, Hebrews preserve the memory of anonymous faith. That alone should make us pause. Because perhaps the greatest acts of faith are still the ones no one applauds. The quiet prayer spoken before dawn. The honest decision made when nobody is watching. The act of forgiveness that never becomes public. The choice to obey when compromise would be easier. Those moments rarely make headlines. Yet Hebrews suggests that heaven sees every one of them. The chapter never promises that faith guarantees an easy life. In fact, it argues almost the opposite. Sometimes faith leads to victory. Sometimes it leads through suffering. Sometimes it changes nations. Sometimes it changes only one heart. But its value never depends on the outcome we can measure. It depends on the one in whom that faith is placed. So the next time you read Hebrews chapter 11, do not see it as a museum filled with impossible heroes. See it as a mirror. Every name asks the same question. Every story points toward the same decision. Every sacrifice whispers the same challenge. What are you trusting? Not what do you say you believe. Not what tradition you inherited. Not what others expect from you. What are you actually trusting when life becomes uncertain? Because sooner or later, every person builds an ark before the rain, leaves home without seeing the destination, or stands before a choice that cannot be solved by evidence alone. That is where Hebrews chapter 11 comes alive. Its heroes were never extraordinary because they never doubted. They were extraordinary because they continued trusting when doubt would have been easier. And perhaps that is why their stories have survived while the empires that oppose them have become ruins. The kingdoms of Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Greece, and Rome all seem permanent. Time proved otherwise. Stone crumbles. Empires collapse. Names fade. But faith continues to echo across generations. Maybe that is the final message Hebrews wanted every reader to carry. Not that faith makes life predictable. Not that it removes suffering. Not even that it answers every question. But that some truths are worth holding on to, even when the entire world says to let go. The men and women of Hebrews chapter 11 believe that. Some lived to see miracles. Others died still waiting. Yet together they leave behind one undeniable testimony. The things we cannot see often shape history far more deeply than the things we can. And now, the chapter quietly hands a story to us. Not to Abraham, not to Moses, not to the anonymous martyrs. To us. Because every generation eventually answers the same question. Will faith remain something remembered only in ancient stories? Or will it become something we choose to live before the evidence appears?